Hello and welcome to today's conversation about the future of short film distribution, and what I'm actually subtitling kind of the panel as well to be about the life of a short film. My name is Amanda Salazar. I am the head of programming and acquisitions at Argo, and I'm so thrilled to have such a wonderful group here with us today. We are filmmakers, distributors, curators, all with a passion and interest in short film. So I'm really excited to dive right in with this lovely group of people. To begin, I would like to have you each actually introduce yourself and perhaps give a little background on what the company you are with kind of here to talk about, or short film that you are here joining the conversation with. So Arcadiy, how about we start with you?
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name is Arcadiy. I'm the founder, CEO of Argo Media. It's a new distribution platform for short content. We're focusing on short film, and we're excited to bring this platform to the world. We're launching it this week, and it's going to be a new kind of distribution platform where we're inviting partners and filmmakers to curate the films with us. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Russo, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I am one of the writer-directors of the Oscar-qualified Stucco.
Excuse me. Big drop there. Big. Just
we got to say it. But
starting strong. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm one half of that team.
I'm clearly the other half. I'm Janina.
Well, thank you both for joining us. Charlie, how about you?
Next. Sure. So I'm Charlie Phillips. I'm head of video at The Guardian, and I set up and run Guardian Documentaries, which is our strand for short docs of anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes. Since I joined about 6 years ago, we've put out well over 100 documentaries. Some of which have been Oscar nominated and Grierson nominated and lots of other award nominated. And what we try and do is films that work at the intersection of video journalism and observational artistic docs. And it kind of seems to work. We get really great filmmakers from all over the world. And I think we put out interesting stuff.
Absolutely. Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Bromberg. I'm the SVP of Gunpowder and Sky, which is an independent studio based in LA and New York and London. I'm also the head of Dust and Alter, and which are two of our key brands that really focus in short form. Dust focuses on science fiction, and Alter focuses on horror. I launched Dust about 4 years ago, and we really short film is the lifeblood of both Dust and Alter, because we were the first to really create a true market for sci-fi focused short films. And then we did the same thing with horror with Alter, and I'll talk more about that later.
Great. And Jack, yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jack Harries. I am a documentary filmmaker. I don't have an Oscar qualifying film currently.
But, I'm going to pay for that later, yeah.
You really are.
Grierson Award. But what I'm the co-founder of a platform called Earthrise Studio, which is a media company dedicated to communicating the climate crisis predominantly. So we make content about the environment. We try and make it a lot more accessible to a younger generation. And I'm currently producing 2 sort of short form digital video commissions under Earthrise Studio, which I'd be really happy to talk more about.
Fantastic. And I'm going to actually prompt you all to talk a little bit more about these backgrounds and kind of the organizations you're with, but I'm going to actually start us off with what feels very broad, because to that point, we're here for this panel, and as we kind of mentioned, there's not a lot of talk around short film and what is happening with it, and I feel like it's such an exciting space right now. So I was just curious if you could each perhaps start with what about the medium, I would say a film under 40 minutes, let's say, excites you the most currently? Who would like to start? Charlie, go for it.
I mean, I guess I feel like I've worked in short docs for for a long time now. I guess I didn't know a lot about short docs till I started at The Guardian, and now it's kind of my whole world. And I think like this feels like a particularly exciting time for people actually wanting to watch short docs. Like there's this massive audience. It's always felt like there's been an audience out there, but the kind of abundance of really great short docs being made, but also platforms who are putting them out and distributors who want to work with them means that they're really getting out there and connecting with people. And you know, I work in online films. Like that's pretty much what I've done for a lot of my working career. And it kind of fits your instincts that people would want shorter content online. And the demand really seems to be there, and that's really exciting. So in some ways, I think what's going on in short docs is more exciting than feature docs because it's connecting more with viewers. It's kind of filling a need. So I guess I'm just excited about that demand being there, and there being a proper industry for it emerging.
And I'll jump in on the docs. I mean, 100% and scripted, which is where my focus is entirely. And I think, maybe this goes without saying, I'm excited because, so you have the demand, but I think maybe the demand had always been there or in some way, and now the platforms allow for the supply to get out and be exhibited to the world because we don't have the structural limitations of like the half-hour, 2-hour, notions, and you slot in a commercial every 8 minutes, and it's like, and it's, I mean, now it's just kind of whatever best serves the story that you're trying to tell. And I just think that's, really, we're in a unique time that, I actually have been saying, I don't even call it short film anymore. I say we're runtime agnostic, because it's like, I just try to, I almost don't, because I don't want short film also to be in any way, kind of, I don't know, a reductive or diminishing of the actual, of the content type. I just think it's kind of, there's this combination of all the, because of streaming, you have the platforms that now can provide and, commercial free, whatever the story best is, combined with just an overall sense of people, maybe on the go and not having much time. So it's like, well, how do you kind of pack in as much story as possible? And so you really have to earn this, more minutes. I mean, if you go beyond, because people are I think, on the move and in a rush. And so, I think it's in a lot of ways has really helped get to a place where storytelling is getting better, I think, actually, because, and that's a grandiose statement, because you can have a story told in, 8 minutes, 14 minutes, 20 minutes. And so, people really expect a lot now when they sit down and watch something.
I can go really quickly.
Yeah, please do.
I think it's a great point, Eric. I think the world has become runtime agnostic. Movies now are 2.5 hours, and that's just standard. So even in long form, right? And, we started seeing this with Comedy Central when they started programming anything that fit within an hour. It just didn't matter. They would figure it out. And even this is just the streaming world in general. You watch a prestige miniseries and every single episode is just it's just like, I don't know, maybe this one's an hour and 5 minutes, guys. We're not sure. It's really whatever serves the story. So I think that's across the board. And, when you do talk about the industry, as opposed to just stories and what gets to be made, what's allowed to be made, that means a lot of money has to be spent and risked. And because so many studios are risk adverse, they're just not betting on newer voices, but the shorts industry is. And you can never hold down those who have a story to tell, right? So if you are interested in finding new voices, if you are interested in finding disruptive artists, you're probably gonna find them in the short space.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of people call short film an innovative format, and yet it actually the oldest format that ever existed. Right? Mm-hmm. The Hollywood started with short film back in the 20s, and the feature-length format is actually something nobody wanted. It was an innovation that was, seemed ridiculous. It was longer and more expensive, and you charge the same for the tickets. the format has always been there, and I've always loved it, and I know a lot of people who do too. Having that said, though, it presents a number of amazing challenges for the filmmaker, because to Eric's point and Janina's point, like, how do you pack a story that is engaging, that is impactful, that is emotional into whatever that 5 to 20, 25, 45 minutes is. And to Charlie's point, it can cover so much more ground. It's upcoming filmmakers from around the world. It creates accessibility for talent to come in and show what they can do.
And Jack, I'd be curious to hear from you too, kind of like your point of where you've, as a documentary filmmaker, and then you having also a platform yourself that is using short content, or like where you're seeing about what's exciting you about this form, or how perhaps you're seeing how it's connecting with audiences better. I'd love to hear how that's working for you too.
Yeah, my background is in making films for YouTube. Like in 2011, I created a YouTube channel. It's how I got my start making films. And back then it was like 5 minutes was the sweet spot for videos on YouTube, and it feels like that attention span has grown a little bit. Maybe it's 10 minutes, then 15 and 20 seems to do well on YouTube. But what's really exciting is then to be seeing documentaries, in particular for me, but also amazing fiction, coming into that space, into that sort of time length, and appealing to my generation, because I come from the generation that have a desperately short attention span. We're distracted by a million different apps at one time. So the idea that there are short films that have real impact, they're about really important topics that fit into that time, really excites me, because I think it makes it more accessible to our generation to learn about these issues, especially when it comes to issues like climate change that are very overwhelming and intimidating for a lot of people. And they wouldn't want to sit down necessarily and watch an hour and a half, 2 hour doc about climate change, but you can have just as much of a powerful message in a 20-minute film. And so I think it makes it more accessible, and it also makes it more accessible to filmmakers, right? To the idea of making a short is something that feels much more in reach than making a feature. So it kind of brings the bar down in that way, and I think that leads to a lot more creative stuff. I tend to think short docs in particular feel a little bit more creative, perhaps. There's more room for creativity and experimentation. And personally, my favorite type is this sort of hybrid that we're seeing a lot of, which is almost like half dramatized and half documentary. And that just feels immensely creative. And it's amazing to see that form developing. But yeah, it just makes me feel very excited to see sort of shorter form content, because I think it's appealing to a younger generation that wouldn't necessarily otherwise be engaging in those topics.
Absolutely. Russo, do you have anything to add of what excites you about the short film world right now, or short film making?
Yeah, I mean, like so to Dustin, we're on Dustin Alter's platform, on the Alter platform, and I was so surprised, and Janina and I were just so surprised by the amount of engagement the community was around, and how much like how smart this community that Dustin Alter has built. The way the discussion, because YouTube comments, you've scrolled down, you guys, it's like,
we all know, if you want to retain any semblance of self-respect, you just don't scroll under your video. Don't do it. Or
your psyche. Yeah, absolutely. But we were scrolling through the comments, and it was all just about the theme of the short, interpretations. That gets me really excited, just because usually that's people talking after a feature-length film. Anytime that I go to a festival to like a shorts block or anything like that, you rarely ever like stick around talking about the shorts afterwards. But here in this comment section, everybody was talking about this thing. So really like building the communities around these platforms, like it's amazing to see what some of these companies have done.
And those are definitely it feels like kind of two things I definitely want to tackle. I want to tackle kind of talking about like the audience and curation and how important that is. And I also do want to talk about maybe kind of the nuts and bolts of these spaces that we're creating. So perhaps we'll start there. And Eric, maybe we can start with you, which is around kind of, if you wouldn't mind talking about like Dustin Alter specifically, kind of about perhaps maybe the specific goals and challenges from your perspectives, from your perspective as to what you're kind of really looking for in kind of building this kind of type of community and kind of the access that filmmakers have. I would love to start with you and then perhaps talk about The Guardian and Argo as like platforms of those goals and challenges you're experiencing. And then I have kind of I'll tailor it a little bit differently to the filmmakers here.
Sure. Well, I'll try to give a bit of a holistic view. I think that'll address it. So, it was kind of like the field of dreams mentality. Like if you build it, they will come. And we didn't know, and maybe someone still don't know, like, there was no higher goal of like, this is how we're going to go make a ton of money on this. I just kind of, 4 years ago was able to, from the co-founders of Gunpowder and Sky, who are my bosses, say to them, look, we have the opportunity to really tackle short form and be able to find and discover new voices and for a pretty low cost. And specifically, if we just aggregate and then curate what we think are the best short films, there's a lot of discovery there, because there's all these filmmakers, and that's what we didn't know initially. And I had a sense of was there's filmmakers who spend a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and time and energy and money, and then their short would go on Vimeo, it gets like maybe 8 views and it just kind of dies like in a shallow grave. And I said, I think we can build a brand to then build a community. And the way we started that is to say, what if we do this across social media, specifically Facebook, actually, because we can then target lovers of science fiction and now later horror. But anybody who would raise their hand and was in the Star Wars group and the Star Trek group and the Black Mirror group, I was like, we can do these paid campaigns to put our these short videos. If we go get them, we can put them in front of these people, and then we can start to build a community pretty organically that way, because they've already raised their hand and said, I love science fiction. And so that's what we started to do. And so I started, went and got 10 short films, and then 20, and then 50, and now I have over 500 on Dust and over 500 in Alter. And so but the core thing is the community, right? I was able to kind of coalesce a community first in the US, but now globally. And I have 4 curators worldwide that kind of find new talent, and again, a lot of this is mostly, 98% of what we have has already been created. It's filmmakers who went and did it themselves, which is also just amazing. So I just wanted to kind of amplify that voice. I'm actually, in some ways, I'm not even like finding them at ground floor. I'm like saying, okay, like you've already made something, and that took a lot of wherewithal, and that's pretty amazing. How do I help you get it out to the masses? And in some ways, build a marketplace, and then have kind of these pillars. And so we've done more, which I can talk about more, but so now it's beyond social media, it's beyond YouTube and Facebook. Now we have channels on Roku and Samsung Plus and Vizio and Zumo and kind of the other direct to consumer, kind of OTT platforms. And so for us, the community, it's what drives everything, because you really, they say, oh, it's being niche, which I guess you could say that, but I just think it's really like, you're super serving a passionate base that I feel like, for us was essential. And it was, short film was the way in. It was kind of the thing that felt where it was scattered, and we could just kind of bring it all together. And just side little thing for Russo and Janina's point, I'm glad that it's so thoughtful that all the commentary is, but also just as a brag for them, they have one of the highest performing short films on all of Alter. It has over 14 million views. It's like a major star, just this awesome short film. And I mention that because we put a little bit of money behind each of these to try to kind of get them to have some sort of lift, and to reach critical mass. Not all short films do, and that's part of it. But I think what's great is like there's, within that community, there starts to be word of mouth, so to speak, kind of a digital word of mouth. And then people are watching and sharing, and it's very, easy to share these things. You don't have to go to a theater, right? It's like that's inherently part of what short film is right now. And so, and all of a sudden you can kind of catch on. And then I think the goal beyond existing on, let's say for me, Dust and Alter, is then it kind of brings you to a whole other stratosphere to be empowered to tell more stories, whether that means you land managers and agents and financing and whatever it is you may want to do and the stories you may want to tell. But we hope that this is kind of an incubator to take these filmmakers to the next level.
I do want to say one thing really quickly, because this is a Sundance panel. And, you know, we're talking about new voices, and that is really who makes these short films mostly, right? First of all, thank you so much, Eric, for saying that. We had no idea. We just made what we needed to make. And I think the one thing that we've learned from all of this is that you have no idea what's going to happen with your short film. Mark Duplass, who's an indie darling from the Duplass brothers, is a really wonderful friend. And he told us very early, oh, I have no idea what festivals you'll get into. You know, you get into about 5%, if you're lucky, of the ones that you apply to, and, you know, you just sort of like hope people see your thing. And, you know, we didn't get into Sundance, but we won a special jury award at South by Southwest. And we have now, I don't know what the number is, but like we've now been seen over 26 million times online on the few platforms. If you would have told me, I would have laughed at you. No way would I have thought that we would be here, especially after being like, Sundance didn't like us. You know, it's just that you don't know. Just right. Know that festivals aren't the only thing out there for you to get your story seen.
Right. Absolutely. And that goes to the fact, right, is that the life of a short film, right, everyone's life is different, to your point.
Very different.
It is finding, I would say, these creative partnerships in a lot of ways, like, right, that makes sense for your film, like finding the homes, which I want to also expand on, because you're absolutely right. Like this is the most exciting space where independent voices and true kind of diversity of experience and ideas can really be seen in the short form. Charlie, I'd love to actually hear from you too about like specifically around The Guardian, like again, your platform, kind of what it specializes in, and then, you know, it's over, you kind of touched in it to your goals, but perhaps also some of those challenges as well that you've experienced for being there for now a couple of years and really building it up to be, I would say, a very reputable platform for short documentaries.
Yeah, so like I was really excited to set this thing up because it seemed like, to me, it seemed really frustrating that there were all these amazing docs out there of all lengths, but particularly short docs, that were just kind of dying a death. Like if they managed to get into festivals, and festival acceptance is totally random, as you were just saying. But it's even more random for short documentaries. Like it's so based on the whims of programmers. It's so based on being the right length and fitting them together in programs. And I worked at Sheffield Doc Fest for years. I love festivals, but they are totally random and, you know, chaotic and like, I don't know. And I'm also not sure how good they are for short docs, but maybe we'll get onto that like in another, you know, in a bit. But I really felt like there was an audience who wanted to see short docs, and there were lots of really great films being made, and this connection just wasn't being made. And then obviously that combined with The Guardian as being this massive platform, mostly for news, mostly for journalism, but for, you know, other kinds of aspects of culture as well, that I just felt like the people who are reading stuff on The Guardian, the people who are listening to The Guardian's podcast and stuff, like they're going to be interested in watching documentaries. They want to know about documentaries, they just don't know where to find them. And that's sort of what I've been trying to build up, really, is kind of going, all of you people who say you're interested in docs, who have this really big crossover between reading the news and being interested in current affairs and being interested in documentaries, like, here are some things that you can watch. And I think that's kind of worked well. I mean, what's still really exciting to me is that I think we're expanding the boundaries of what people both inside The Guardian, but also Guardian readers / audiences think of being a documentary, or think of being kind of relevant and newsworthy. And a lot of the films that we do, you can see why you're watching them on The Guardian. You can see that they are very vaguely newsworthy, and they're about something that's kind of in the world at the moment and relevant, but they definitely don't look like, you know, news reports. They don't look like current affairs videos. They look like proper documentaries. And I think that's really nice to just really sort of give the people watching videos on films on The Guardian like a bit of a like crash education in all the different formats of documentaries. And we've really tried to push the boundaries with that. And sometimes it's worked, sometimes it's not worked, but I think it's always been a really interesting experiment. But also fundamentally, I think it's another way for our audience to learn about what's going on out there in the world. And we've really seen that with lockdown in the last year, that I felt this real responsibility, actually, like across the documentaries, but also across our kind of longer news feature videos, to be the eyes of our audience. Like, people are sitting like me in their house, having a very small window on the world. And what we're doing is we're going, you know, look at these people in Kenya, look at these people in Mexico, like this is what's going on at the moment. And that's exciting when you're doing it with the news, but I think it's even more exciting when you're doing it with documentaries, because you're going, spend 20 minutes with this character, like spend 20 minutes in this story, and it's just really broadening people's horizons, and that's super exciting to me. Like, it does come with challenges, not just in terms of, you know, does this film work or not, but in kind of fighting for space on a platform like The Guardian. Like, we've had a crazy year for news, but we've actually had like a crazy 5 years for news. It's been completely nonstop. And that is just, that takes all of the kind of real estate on the Guardian website. Like, if I'm there going, you know, we've got this really lovely 20-minute doc about this indigenous leader in Mexico, which was the last doc that we put out, a really lovely film called Lupita. And it's really important and it's really lovely. It's kind of hard sometimes to convince people that is more worthy of their 20 minutes than reading about what Trump's just done, for example. So you're kind of, there's this kind of internal battle that I think is really interesting, but I think it's a battle that we kind of regularly win. And when we look at the numbers of people who are watching our films, it's really great. Like, I'm always really happy with the number of people that are watching our films, and it's definitely more people than would be watching those films in festivals, where you're talking about such a limited audience. So kind of that ability to bring documentaries to the people is the thing that kind of keeps me excited about what we're doing.
Yeah, and I especially just also love the work that you're doing. It feels also very evergreen, right? So to that point, like, that films I think that I could find maybe that were made a year ago actually are still very relevant. And I think that also speaks to the curation. Mm-hmm. I like what you said, fighting for space. And I kind of want to then ask, you know, about Argo and this, like, the challenges there as a new company, and kind of thinking about the kind of ethos and as you're building it, but also the goals of Argo, where it's really embracing short film in all of its forms and styles and genres. So Arcadiy, I'd love to hear from you kind of about as it's launching and as a new platform.
Thanks. You know, I just want to say it's amazing to listen to all of you. It's, you know, when we started talking about short films as a business venture, most people looked at us and go like, "Oh, like, are you starting a new hobby, or what is this about?" And you know, the more I dived into the world of short film, the more I just discovered how vast it is. You know, Sundance got more than 10,000 submissions last year, and I think more than 11 or 12,000 submissions this year of short films only. You know, there's a clear indicator that there's a huge amount of talent that is untapped, that is undiscovered, that is unrealized all over the world. I believe you know, 60 or 70% of those submissions are international. So when we set out to build Argo, it was about building that community. It's, you know, how do we bring people together? How do we bring companies together? How do we add value to companies like Dust? How do we add value to companies like Sundance? How do we add value to the filmmakers? it is all about engagement. It's about discovering your audience, and that's about engaging them on multiple levels, preserving them for your future work. There's so much technology available today. It's confusing, and you know, on your own, for a filmmaker, to, as Giz mentioned, to just go to YouTube or Vimeo, it's not really an option. And you know, that's how Argo was born. Like, we've produced feature films before, we've built streaming platforms before, and we realized that there really isn't a platform for short film where someone like Dust and someone like The Guardian could meet and share an audience, or have a discussion about a common theme. Because one of our ethos is pushing conversations forward, because short film is such a powerful format. We chose this format of playlists, which you all might have heard from you by now, where we put together a number of these short films that are related somehow to each other under one theme or style or topic, and then we take that theme and look for that audience. And we're getting great feedback, and we're getting great feedback from our partners. As we're launching now more fully with a more complete product and with a larger library, and hopefully with more partners, we hope to kind of bring people together and then have more of these discussions, and have more of the and prolong film's shelf life. Because there's so much more you can do. We hope to bring the gravity of our tech expertise into this.
I want to hear from Jack next, actually, because I think your point of where you started as a filmmaker and then kind of creating this platform yourself and creating a company and creating kind of awareness around something you're very passionate, feels like a natural extension again of your work. And this actually goes into kind of that point of finding your audience. I think where like curation and your kind of like passion kind of combine. And so I'm curious if you could talk about also, I'm curious to your point, like about kind of goals and challenges with the work that you're facing, like what you're doing, but then also kind of following your intuition in some ways as a filmmaker to create a platform yourself and trying to connect with audiences yourself. I'd love if you could kind of expand on that a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so Earthrise, the idea of Earthrise came about because in 2015, I made a documentary with the WWF where I went to Greenland to make a film about glacial retreat. And it was the first time really that I had engaged with the issue of climate change, to be honest, in a sort of deep way, and we were sort of transported to the front lines of climate change. And I spent a night camping on the Yakov Southern Glaciers, one of the most southern glaciers in Greenland. And I will never forget the sound of the piece of ice breaking off the front of this glacier. And that trip turned my world upside down. It brought this issue alive for me. And I think that's the power of film, is to transport people to places, as Charlie was saying earlier, from their bedrooms. And also I think, when it comes to an issue like climate change, and this is the same for many social issues, in a way, it's a storytelling issue. We need to get better at telling that story. And I think when you look at the way we've told the story of climate change, for years it's been about the environment, about sort of remote things in the environment. It's often confused by data and graphs and numbers. It feels very overwhelming, hard to understand how it impacts you in your life, how you can take action. And so I think the failure that has happened around the storytelling of climate change is we've forgotten to put the people at the heart of it. We've forgotten to tell the human stories when it comes to climate change. And I think that's what the power of film can do. And I think that's why short films are so important. In a way, they've never been more important, right, in this time of fake news and misinformation, to have a medium where you can have nuance and you can sort of tell a human story is so fundamentally important to help people understand issues in a deeper way. So that's where the motivation came for me to start a platform. I felt I wasn't seeing the type of stories around climate change that would move me. And so then I thought, well, how can I expect anyone else to care about this issue? I would speak to friends and they were like, I don't get it. It feels overwhelming. I don't know how to take action. And that to me seemed like a huge issue. So together with my partner Alice, who's a documentary filmmaker, and my brother Finn, who's a producer, we created this platform. And, you know, we started just with an Instagram account, started making infographics, and that was through that we spent a few months doing that. And I'm sure everyone on this call can relate to that feeling of like, feeling like you know where you want to be, but it feeling nowhere near good enough. And that was like that really steep learning curve of making stuff and looking at it and being like, this looks like crap, but I know where I want it to be. And after, you know, a few 3-4 months of doing that, we started to feel we were developing the language we wanted to speak in. And we were, you know, working with our audience in real time to understand how did they best respond to learning about this issue. So we learned that people liked positive news, even though we have to be realistic about, you know, an issue like climate change. People want positivity, that makes sense. They related 10 times better to human stories when we would talk about someone, one individual on the front lines of climate change and how this, you know, climatic change was affecting their life rather than some remote data about, you know, a glacier melting. People responded way better. And also just short and simple, bold statements rather than 10 different, you know, pages on Instagram with lots of information. So that was a real process for us of really learning, listening to our audience, learning what they responded to, and sort of figuring out how to tell this story better. And so today, you know, we have 120,000 people on the Instagram account, and this year we've started making video content. And so our first sort of stab at video is a 5-part explainer series, which we're making for Waterbear Network, or in partnership with Waterbear Network. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it's a platform dedicated to short form and long form content all around the future of our planet. And we're going to be exploring more of an explainer style content. So yeah, it's been a journey, but you know, I think I've always learned that way by just sort of engaging in that conversation with an audience. And I think it's a really powerful way to learn. It can be a little bit painful. You sort of just throw yourself into the deep end, and you have to make the mistakes and get it wrong. But ultimately, that's the best way to learn. You know, you have to ask people what they want to see rather than just making something and hoping people connect with it.
Right. And kind of going to that journey that you were talking about, Jack, and learning from it. I'm so curious that, like, Russo and Janina, you would talk about, you know, this being your first film together and it jumping to these like exponentially high views and, you know, Oscar qualifying, all these things. Like, your journey has been this incredible one. And I'm curious, again, speaking of this being a panel for short filmmakers or just like anyone really interested about the short form, where it's going, kind of the stuff that perhaps the things you learned along the way, or like what surprised you, and then perhaps even talking about finding those creative partnerships, like with Dust, or something that excited you, and or perhaps some advice you have to any filmmakers watching about trying to connect to those audiences.
Mm-hmm. I would say, first of all, you got to be super, super lucky. That seems to be the number one thing. The way that we like found Alter and Argo. First of all, Alter was I was looking through YouTube the night before we started shooting, and I found the Alter YouTube channel, and I was like, this would be amazing to put Stucco on here. They seem like they have a great infrastructure or whatever. And after we got into our first festival, which was Holly Shorts, they were on one of the panels that Janina was on.
This is so insane. So I'm sitting so we're discussing, by the way, like people have just seen this film for the first time, and you know, it didn't blow up in our face. So we were like, oh wow, maybe we have a thing, you know. So I'm sitting on a panel for women in film, and to my left is Chevis, who ended up working at Gunpowder and Sky, which is the umbrella company of Dust and Alter. And when she said where she worked, my head snapped to Russo, who was in the audience, and I was like, oh, she's just sitting right next to me. Oh, right, that's just weird. So that's a bit of luck. You know, you never really know. But the thing that we have to say here, you know, before we really get into the weeds, is there is art and there is industry. They are two different things. They can overlap when you're lucky, but as you are suffering through industry things, if you don't mean the art that you made, none of this is worth it and none of it is sustainable. So mean what you make, because it will save you as you get through the learning curve. And as Jack was talking about this, like, I know where we want to be. I call that the valley of disappointment. I don't just call that, lots of people call that. It's like a tech term, right? That's where you are right now. We know that we have to go here. If you look at this graph, there is a mountain that we have to climb, but we will, you know? So that is a very real thing. It is part of the experience as you figure things out, and try to get your way through a strange industry that is so siloed that you're just like, how am I going to figure any of this out? You just have to really make sure that you made what you mean. So I wanted to say that, and I don't know what the next thing was that I was going to say. So
well,
Russo,
in
go ahead.
terms of like new short filmmakers, especially because you know, this was our like first directorial offering. You know, I would say don't try to tackle any kind of like Christopher Nolan story. Don't tell me that love is the fifth dimension or whatever. Like follow a simple 3-act structure. And
One idea.
Yeah, and then tell the truth. That's all you got to do to really resonate with people. And all those cool things should follow, or you just keep making stuff until it does.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is it's like it's short. The point is to make more. And you know, if it went well, then you should absolutely be making more. If it went bad, you should absolutely be making more, because they're only going to get better. It's like film school, you know, you have to equate these things to any other medium. If you're a painter, you're going to paint a lot of paintings before anybody notices. If you're going to be a pianist, you're going to play a lot of pieces before you get to play in front of anybody, you know?
Yeah. And in terms of finding, like in a more traditional way than just like, you know, showing up somewhere and then you're like, hey, and then the person points back, they're like, hey. Like,
it doesn't work like that.
No. I mean, the film festivals are a great place to meet people. I mean, that's how we found ours. But you know, I've been meeting other filmmakers, other horror filmmakers who have, you know, been making their own platforms essentially, and still seeing, you know, success that way in the millions of views, or like there's this guy Evan, I'm blanking on his last name, but he made this TikTok series that's just amazing about these like timeout dolls, and I think that's been like, and I think that's been seen like 30 million times or something like that. So like there are avenues to get to tell your story, and there are like great platforms like we have here. Like Argo is doing an amazing curation. The playlist that we're a part of, every single film is incredible. So,
and if you want to be a snob and you don't think that TikTok is fancy enough for you, and you only want to play with the Guardian, then, you know, I mean, listen, like you have people here on this panel that have made platforms that are, you know, prestige. There is a place for you. Yeah.
And to that end, I kind of want to just pivot this to because I want to kind of switch this a little bit into the online space, because that's, I think, what I want to spend some time here with this group, right? Is that there's this perceived barrier, I think, and I think for short films, it hasn't been such, as we've all kind of said over time, but like, especially now, right, where festivals are virtual, Sundance is all virtual, that people are seeing this panel from home. And how the industry is having to respond to it out of necessity. And there have been a lot of people for a long time that have embraced, like, let's go online. We can do this. There are audiences there. And so I would love to kind of open end, if like we could talk about why it is important to embrace the digital and virtual space as a place to discover film and great art. And, you know, filmmakers here, it's kind of like, to your point, like what perhaps the filmmakers at the end of this, like might not need, like would be interested in knowing that that's not very clear to them about digital distribution, or like even how to get their film on one of these platforms. Who would like to start?
I'm just going to say, just submit. People can say no. not everyone's gonna say no. Just try it.
Most
You
people
know?
are going to say no, and that's okay.
Oh yeah, also that. Most people are gonna say no, and that's also okay. Yeah. Just do it. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah,
Be
totally.
fearless.
I think I think you're probably going to get a more kind of open and constructive no from online platforms, in my experience. Like a rejection from a film festival is just like a wall coming down. Like you don't get anything back. You just get a no, and then you're just floundering and sad. Whereas, and I can only really speak for myself, but actually from speaking to other people at other platforms, you actually like can get into a bit of a dialogue, and then maybe your next film will get accepted. It just feels like a much more kind of democratic universe.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's really important for short documentaries in particular, because you're not just dealing with new filmmakers. Like we've worked with really established filmmakers as well, but sometimes you are dealing with people starting out, and you're just looked after a bit more, I think.
And would you say, because I also, again, I want to hear from Eric and Arcadiy as well about this too, that you experience any kind of hesitation about it only being online? Like, I guess that's what I'm also trying to demystify here for anyone that's perhaps watching, like, embrace this. It's here, it's been here. I'm curious if you've had any experience like that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, maybe, I mean, as the years have gone by, it's just become more accepted, I would say. You know, I don't think there's, I'm trying to think of like, especially in the short film format, but I would say in general, I mean, it's just such a democratized way to have content out there. It's how we all now kind of exist, I mean, especially through COVID, but I think, you know, but prior to that, and especially now beyond, once we're out of this, and never want to look back. But what we will hold on to is having digital community and what it is to just like have your content, have art exist online in every way, and it's like I think that although the walls of structure of how a story is told, you know, as Jack mentioned, it's like they started with like Instagram, you know, thing. I mean, it's like I can't tell how many memes I have in my feed that feel like I now it's like, oh, wow, I'm like that's pretty darn clever and awesome, even though it's just like an image with. I mean, it's like it's changing now rapidly, and this is the way that we are now connected. And so I don't, you know, to demystify it, I think it's even beyond that. I think it's being embraced and shared, and honestly, the key thing is like now is the monetization. I mean, and that's where, you know, you have the big traditional players like, well, you know, what are we doing? We have to make money, and there's a waterfall of how this works, and it starts in a box office and it comes all the way down. And I think that will also change. Like those financial models are catching up. And I think there's a lot of people who obviously are just creating content and say, you know, we mean what we make, as Janina said, you know, something in us wants to put this particular thing out into the world, whether it's, you know, for the Guardian and it's to have social impact, you know, and something for Earthrise, or even I would say the same with Dust and Alter. A lot of our best stuff has underpinnings of social impact, but whatever it is, people are making it. And I think that the model will catch up. It'll follow, because it'll garner eyeball, you know, and Arcadiy and I have talked about this a little bit, like it'll get eyeballs and get community, and they all show up. And at some point someone figures out, yeah, this is the money that needs to then happen to have more of this. And then it just becomes a bigger wheel that starts to, you know, kind of innovatively redefine the you know, how the money gets allocated. But I think from the content side, it's already happening. So I think it's already beyond, in my mind at least, maybe I'm in a bubble, it's beyond being demystified. It's already happening, and you're seeing it kind of accelerate.
And Quibi's already dead, guys. So the big failure has already happened. We've learned a ton.
Rise from the ashes of
forward.
Quibi. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I just want to throw in, like, from a filmmaker's perspective, there's never been a better time to be making stuff and getting it out there. You know, like the beautiful thing about the internet is there are no gatekeepers. Literally anyone can create an account on Vimeo or YouTube or Facebook, whatever platform, and upload your stuff. And I think when I got started in 2011, you know, you did that, and the only way you would cut through is if you got on the homepage of YouTube or something. And what's so great about now is you have these platforms like Argo, like Dust and Alter, like Short of the Week, that are curating that content. And I think those curation platforms are so, so important. And I don't see those as gatekeepers. I see them as the opposite. They're there to lift up your film. If it's good, it'll get onto one of those platforms and that will find you your audience. And so I think, you know, there's never been more streamers commissioning content right now. And a lot of that is short form. Like you have Netflix have just launched a new short form fund for British stories. And we're seeing more and more short form content on there. So go for it. It's never ever been a better time.
Yeah, and it feels like audiences want to be part of that success, right? They want to see you get better. They want to be a part of that journey, and that only like builds your audience even more each time.
You can see that real time on Twitch. You know, I mean, that's a completely different panel. But, you know, Russo and I are gamers, and the games industry is a big part of our life. And you can learn a lot from the real time experience of streamers and how their engagement with their audience grows, or, you know, it's just, it's all the same. It's humans and it's their engagement with art. And if it's not quote unquote art by your definition, it is communication of self. So, you know, we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, and listen, people want to engage. And as we're seeing more and more from data, people are willing to pay for, you know, quote unquote premium content, which in this case just means, you know, good cinema. You know, to our earlier point, short film, long film, it's just cinema. It has to be good. It has to tell a story. If you tell a story, you can engage people. And, you know, whatever the platforms we built, whatever, you know, Eric is building across multiple platforms, we're just trying to bring people in for, you know, for more of a conversation. And there are challenges and ways to improve how to do it with free streaming, with ads. And I think now especially, you know, with COVID and Quibi both accelerating the good trend of putting good things behind subscription, because you know, filmmakers should look at short films with a return on investment perception. I truly believe that, and I think that's exactly where we're going, and I think we're going to get there much faster than the general industry believes.
Yeah, I think, like, I mean, I don't want to dwell on Quibi too much. I'm sure we're allowed to talk about it, but I think, like,
eulogy panel.
Amazing stuff.
I think, like, yeah, another 2 hours. The problem was that the content wasn't right, but actually the model that people might want to pay to watch short form content is totally spot on. They just went for completely the wrong thing. So there are good things to take from that. There are definitely positives to take from that. It shows that there's a market.
Absolutely. And just coming, you know, Charlie, it's so funny because as a festival programmer myself, like, I continue to, you know, program, and, you know, it's so funny that there's some qualities that I agree with you with, that like festivals are very constrictive and just how they have to program and what they're programming, and for, you know, a very in-person audience. So it's so exciting to me that this panel is like the life beyond film festivals, right? Because I do think short filmmakers, for so long, it has been like festivals is the route. And there's absolute value to that, as we've all seen. I love what you had to say, Janina and Russo, too, like where your film started, and like the fact that it provided these industry connections. Like, there's such value to these spaces, and they're all integrated. They all need to work together. And so I just really appreciate that this kind of, I hope that this gives some kind of, you know, next step to filmmakers watching this. Like, there is a route, like you can do it, you can build it yourself, or you can find partners that want to work with you. And there are spaces that can actually work to even monetize your film, like work with you on getting some money. It sounds crazy that we're running out of time. I hate this because I think that we have such a great group of minds here to talk about their experiences, but I don't want us to kind of like wrap up without perhaps one more question. And by the way, feel free to chime in about anything else. But I am curious, you know, if you could, from the platform's perspective, you know, Argo, you know, Guardian and Dustin Alter, if you could like briefly talk about how a filmmaker could actually submit or you know, get their film on your platform. But then also, I'd be curious if you all might like give one perhaps takeaway for a short filmmaker, you know, that is watching this panel right now about, you know, the future of short film distribution for them, like what they should take away from this.
Shall I go first?
Sure, Charlie.
Sure.
So yeah, to send us pitches, and we kind of prefer people to send us like shorts that they're working on rather than completed shorts, but you can do that as well if you want. You email pitches.documentaries@theguardian.com. So that's pitches.documentaries@theguardian.com. And we like to get like 1 to 2 page treatment plus some kind of tease or trail or visual material. It's pretty flexible, really, but that's like the ideal thing. And we try and respond to everyone as quickly as possible. Like in terms of tips or like one thing to take away, like it really is just send us your stuff. Like we're really interested in people's ideas. Like all of the films that we've ever done on The Guardian have just come from people getting in touch with me. And some of those people I knew and lots of those people I didn't know. So I can never really stress this enough. Like actually do get in touch with your ideas and we actually will respond. It's as simple as that.
I'll chime in. So you can, for us, you can submit online. For Dust, it's watchdust.com. For Alter, it's watchalter.com. And you click and you'll see where to submit as a filmmaker. And so, and there's a bit of a backlog, so it might take a moment to get to it, but we will for sure. And yeah, look, I don't know if there's any encapsulating one thing I would say other than just kind of for filmmakers, keep doing what you're doing. You know, I think short films just has a long lifespan. I would say that, you know, it's a good time to be, you know, yeah, it's a good time to be making films and making short films, and you know, people are very empowered right now, and you can just, you know, cameras are incredible, and to do your own effects and your editing. I mean, you know, I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't know, but it's a great time. And I think that even like what Jack mentioned about the Netflix grant for short films, and I mean, that's going to just catch on and become more commonplace everywhere. You'll start seeing the big, you know, the traditional players just kind of throwing money around. You have the different experimentations on the platforms, from Love, Death, and Robots, which has big people involved, to smaller things that kind of pop, and it's already going in a direction where, yeah, these kind of self-delineated boundaries of runtime will just not really matter, you know. I mean, as has been said. And so it's like, I think that it's just the story that you're telling, whatever how long it takes to tell. There's just going to be more and more opportunity for more platforms like the ones that I oversee, and others that are sprouting up, and Argo that pulls things in, and all, you know, and more to come, you know, and the Guardian on the unscripted side, nonfiction, documentary telling, whatever the story, there's a place for it. There's community for it. I think so. You know, it'll kind of rise to the top for the stuff that is kind of fits that group best.
And, you know, for Argo, like on our website, watchargo.com, like there's a submit button where, you know, everyone are welcome to recommend films they love and they think we should feature, and they're welcome to submit their own films. But we are, you know, earlier stage startup, and even though we'll already had more than 1,000 submissions, this is less of a priority for us right now, because we're focusing on creating with and for our partners, which is, you know, festivals and companies like Guardian and Dust. And soon we're releasing a new feature, which is specifically a filmmaker registration on the website, where you'd be able to register as a filmmaker, and through that you'll be able to associate yourself with the films that are curated or playing on Argo. You'll be, and if you don't have films on Argo yet, you'll be still searchable as a filmmaker. You know, this will hopefully lay a foundation to create a database and a community that, you know, all of our partners will have access to, and hopefully will create more collaborations.
Very exciting. And for Janina, Russo, and Jack, again, I just so appreciate each one of your perspective. I think it's so important for filmmakers to hear about, again, like doing this themselves. Luck is involved. All these things that you had said, I think, are so powerful. So I don't think there's really a way to kind of encapsulate what you've been able to offer. But I'd be curious if you want to perhaps chime in with some thoughts around, the future of, short film distribution, or any advice you want to give fellow filmmakers that are also watching this, interested in kind of pursuing this medium more.
Well, I would definitely. Oh, go ahead, Jack.
No, after you.
Nope.
Okay, I'll throw one super quick bit of advice and then hand over to you. Yeah, my advice, maybe just sort of like looking back at stuff I've done, is think about the purpose of your film and the impact you want it to have. Every film has a social impact, whether it's a really obvious one or a less obvious one. And I've found when you make films with an intentional social impact, it's amazing what can happen. It's amazing what doors open up, what organizations will get behind it and help support the release of it. So think about what impact you're trying to have and what communities there are out there that are being affected by that issue, and also what organizations there are out there, because there will already be loads that are doing work in that space. And I've always found it's amazing how much support you can find if you're clear about the impact you're hoping to have with your film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to say that the world has changed a little bit. So if you feel like you have been marginalized, you actually can scour the internet to find support. There are a lot of really big, smart companies that are paying attention to marginalized voices. So don't feel like you are going to be overlooked anymore. If you look for a place that will advocate for you, you will find one. So you should feel very positive about that. And also, don't stop at one. Just keep going. Just keep saying things. And also, don't worry about polish. Russo and I watch things all the time. I mean, we're watching things every day. And our biggest gripe is there were no interesting ideas in that. Like, not even one interesting thing happened in that thing. Why? That's mostly like really big budget films where there's a lot of support. The irony is the more money that is at stake, oftentimes the less interesting they are. So don't look at your meager funds as a limit. See it as freedom. Nobody is going to hold you back if you're like, watch me stretch this dollar. In fact, once you're done and they find out what you did with so little, you will be given a lot more in a faster amount of time.
And
sure.
My only thing that I will add to that is there's specificity and universality. Be specific, tell it from a point of view. This is the internet. This is digital distribution. People will find it. You'll find your corner, you'll find your people, and good things happen after that.
I mean, again, you guys, this is so wonderful. I'm just, I'm very hopeful and excited about, again, the people that are creating the work and supporting the work in this space. So thank you so much for being here today and joining us. We hope to stay in touch, and goodbye, everyone.